Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
See, I have some kind of a beard, whereas you don't have much at all, so I think I'm more dwarf than you. That's what I'm going with.
Well, I'm definitely more stubborn than you, but that's a different conversation. But yes, we're continuing our deep dive into the various 0.51 FAQ update or errata update from GW, going through each of the factions, talking about what we believe are some of the biggest impacts to them and what we're seeing happening in the meta. So, Evan, let's continue this journey. And what are we seeing happening over in the Dwarven Mountain Hold?
So we have the FAQ update that Games Workshop released that kind of just cut the legs that it didn't have out from under the Anvil of Doom, because they made many of the spells harder to cast, and they lowered the power level of its casting from 3 to 2, which I don't really get, because there's a lot of bound spell casters, especially in like the Legacy Armies list and stuff, that have like power level 2 and 3, and the Anvil being 2 does not make sense. I think it really should have just stayed 3. And they also removed the ability, or they clarified that you're not allowed to just give it the toughness 10 rune and have the anvil and everything have toughness 10 against shooting and stuff like that. So, wow, they really just wanted to swat the anvil play down. I don't know if people really bring the anvil anymore, in particular because of how much, less value it has compared to its price. And it still can't move, right?
Yeah, I think that one is a little bit surprising. I mean, because they didn't update any of the spells, right? In terms of their casting, because there's just bound power levels. So it's not easier to cast those spells. It's harder to cast them now. I could have certainly seen, like, okay, let's reduce its power level from 3 to 2 to make it easier to dispel them. But then you would have thought they would have also then updated the spell casting values a
Yeah,
little bit
instead,
down
Mike,
as
they made them
well.
harder to cast.
Yeah, that was it was really interesting, the doubling down. And honestly, I didn't really see the Anvil of Doom spells being that much of an issue in the meta whatsoever, honestly. The biggest challenges we saw with the Anvil of Doom is when people were playing the rules wrong, or they were using the toughness 10 and therefore is effectively unkillable with that rune. But really, that was the only issue. Otherwise, very killable unit, right? So I think if they had just addressed that, saying, no, you can't use the rune to make your entire thing toughness 10, and they did sort of address it, said, no, it's not the anvil, it's the character that has the toughness, right? This could have been resolved in other ways. So yeah, I am that they made these choices, and I agree that odds the spells are so much harder now. We really haven't been seeing them on the table field as much, and I don't know if we're going to see them at all going. I think a lot of people are going to pull them out of.
Okay, so next up we have Hammerers, who personally I kind of think are like just wow, adorable, and especially with the they benefit massively from the ability to use the parry rule, and then to be able to switch weapons. So if they take a charge from something they're actually concerned about, which a lot of the time they're not, but they're like 2 attacks each when they get charged, or something like that, they can use their hand weapon and shield and just parry and have that 3+ armor save. So they're almost like an iron breaker at that point. Or they could be like, okay, here comes the big papa and hit you with the 2-handed hammer, and just wow, that is gonna just trollop people. And look, they're expensive. I think that kitted out hammers are something like 17 points each, but
Yeah.
man, that seems fantastic. If I'm playing dwarves, I'm bringing hammers and I'm just gonna stick them in there in the middle of my battle line and just kind of run them forwards, because that seems fantastic and awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
hammers are awesome. They are easily one of the best units. Certainly, they were strong before, but the 1.51 updates have made them so much stronger. Right, they're more durable. I just love that you have choices of what weapons you want to use when you want. They have so many different abilities. They are tough. They hit like a brick, and they're not going to run. Hammerers, and they look really, really cool. I think we're going to see a lot more of these on the table before than we did.
certainly hope so. Now we only have a couple dwarf players in our meta, but I actually have a dwarf army, and I've got hammers, and they're pretty great.
They're very cool.
I think I've played them like twice. Okay. Next up, we have Trollhammer Torpedo, the old classic, old reliable, versus the cannon. And it used to be, okay, well, the Trollhammer's cheaper and has a higher ballistic skill on a dude who can just roll to hit instead of a cannon which can bounce and misfire and all that stuff. But now they're like massively swatted down the Trollhammer Torpedo and made it strength 5 when I think it was something like 8 before. Wow, that is punishing. Very punishing. And, you're still going to start seeing, okay, well, cannon strength 10, Trollhammer strength 5, that's a big difference, and I think cannons can be quite good now. I think that you're always going to see dwarves complaining that their cannon's not as good as Empire cannons. it's really just the access to the runes. There's not any runes on there that make them like incredibly good. If there was a rune on there that let you fire twice, it would be just as broken as if Cathay can do it. And you know, the D3 damage versus D3 plus 1, Games Workshop obviously doesn't understand that D3 plus 1 is almost twice as good as D3. So that is a problem that they need to fix on their side, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think, before with the Trollhammer, it was just so good before. Everybody was taking it all the time. They were specifically building lists to see how many Trollhammer torpedoes they could get in their list. They're still really, really good. They're just not an auto take, this will just kill anything in the game anymore. And it was so good before. You're just like the rest of the unit was really just there just to deliver the Trollhammer. So people were really trying to do MSU units just to see how many Trollhammers they could get to the list. And I totally get it because it was so powerful. It was creating weird skew and clearly not what GW was intended. So I still think the Trollhammer Torpedo is still a fantastic item, but certainly if you're a Dwarf player who've been using it before with the higher strength value for all those months, and now it's a much lower strength value, it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. I still think we're going to see them. I think we're just not going to see an auto take of 3 of them anymore with MSU units.
Okay, so then I have new kinds of shooting up here. So me personally, I think that the age of just having artillery and magic missiles be the only shooting that exists on the table might be gone. In particular, we've seen a lot of people bringing the dwarves with a runic weapon that just gives you stupidity if you get hit by it. And if you just put that on your engineer with his engineer rune when he has Bliss Skill 5, you could just dole out stupidity to a bunch of different units and things like Razor Gore and Warbeast in particular, because they have low leadership and they can't use anyone else's leadership for their test. So if you give them stupidity, it might actually just screw them up for permanently. That's pretty crazy. So that's another example of kind of like how I think that the shooting meta has really been shifting. Ranks upon ranks of crossbows, I think is perfectly fine. I think there's going to be a lot of units of 5 fast cav who are trying to score the objective in the middle of the board. Cool, great for them. But you know what? If you had just a couple of correlers, you can kill one guy off that unit and rob them of a bunch of victory points. You don't need to kill the whole unit. If you just kill one guy, that works. Dwarves, we've also seen people playing a lot of Thunderers in the X-Force list and just being like, cool, these guys are entrenched, so they can't take the impact hits or stomp attacks because they're just behind a virtual wall. Some people actually bring their own little walls for them to sit behind. But again, just having ranks of shooting units, I think, is a much more viable strategy than it was before 1.5.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay. Rune of Calm is a dwarf rune that you can take on a runesmith, for example, and it's basically a bound spell. And if you cast with an 8 or higher, it's like drain magic. With the enemies have +2 to their casting value they have to hit to be able to get a spell off, and it has range 18 with if you get an 8 or higher, which is not a lot of range, but if you're marching towards the enemy, that's perfect, pretty okay. And then if you get it on a 11 or higher, which is pretty hard to do with a power level 2, then it's range 36, which basically just means it's going to be like a whole table. And I've been playing a lot with Drain Magic with my Wood Elves lately, and Drain Magic is great. Making the other person roll a 10 to cast a Fireball, or an 11 to cast Blue Fire, something like that, wow, that is going to shut down their ability to cast things. And it doesn't stack with magic resistance, so as soon as the spell goes off, it just goes off. It just makes it harder to get it off in the first place, right? So that's kind of pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's very, very good. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the meta, right? Just things that the difference of that +4 to cast we're seeing before, and now we're seeing a lot more of the +1s and the +2s. Things like before Drain Magic didn't really seem worth it, and Magic Resistance didn't seem worth it. I think both of those, we've said in multiple of the other videos, have significantly higher value before, right? It's not necessarily about I have to dispel that particular cast that you cast. If I could just make it slightly harder for you to cast it, the odds swing significantly just by 1 or 2 in the odds of you not getting it off. So I think we're going to see Rune of Calm a lot more than we saw before.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting. And then the Runesmiths can give a unit MR2. So again, just having cheap Runesmiths to give your units magic resistance can be very good against some of those other spells like Plague of Rust that you really don't want cast on. Especially because if you're a dwarf, you got lots of armor. Okay, coming up next is Rangers, who can kind of combine some of the amazing abilities that the latest changes have gotten. So first of all, we can attack in 2 ranks when they get charged, which, if you have great weapons, could be quite a absolute crap load of attacks. If you have a unit of like 14 Rangers in 2 ranks deep, they can fire a decent number of crossbow shots, or 2 ranks can fire against any kind of large target. And then if they get charged, they can stand and shoot and then hit with 2 ranks of Axemen, which is pretty exciting, I think. And then, or you can have the heavy armor, which you already get, and the shield, and then parry for a 3+ armor save. And if you're just a ranger who's like, cool, I stood and shoot, maybe I did some damage on my shooting, so that gives me combat res, and then I'm a 3+ armor save. Maybe you don't do any damage to me now, and I just win because of that shooting combat res that I got, right? So I think that Rangers might be one of the better core units in the game, in particular for the Grand Army Dwarfs, because you can just take a pretty decent unit of them. You can scout, or you can just deploy normally, and you can have weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, so you're both better at shooting and halfway decent when you get charged in combat. And sure, you're expensive to do that, but I think that it might be better off doing that than having the separate unit of Corlers and a separate unit of Warriors to try to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I love the Ranger unit. I thought they were great before. I think they're even better now. They're so versatile, and the fact that they can scout, right, because that really helps one of the Dwarf's biggest challenges of not being at the right place at the right time or not being able to react enough, right? But if you can put a couple of these units out there to harass the flanks of your enemy, don't underestimate them. They can do quite a bit of damage, and they can take a punch, right? So you're like, oh, I'll just go take them out with my skirmishing unit or my fast cavalry unit. It's not going to go the way you want it to go with those Rangers. They are certainly the most durable scouting unit, if not, maybe not the most, but top 3 most durable scouting units in the game. And they're very, very versatile. That's one of the biggest things they bring to the table that scouts typically don't bring. Typically, scouts do one thing. We are a shooting unit. We are an evasive unit. We are a melee unit. But the Rangers kind of do it all. I love this unit, and the models are super cool. I think we're going to see more of them as we go forward.
So next up is the role of Gyrocopters. Well, what do Gyrocopters do? Well, in particular, you've got the ability to move around the table quickly and shoot at enemy units. In particular, I'm ragging on this constantly, the fast cav unit that goes and grabs the objective from behind you, and then you're like, damn it, what am I going to do? Well, Gyrocopters, if you take the default steam gun, you just automatically hit if you get the template over somebody, and or you can do drop over people and just roll that 4 up. Sure, having to roll to hit for your templates might feel bad, but you also have to roll to hit for your regular shots. And those hits are always going to be on that 4 up on the partial for a template. It's not going to be affected by any minuses to hit from anybody else. So I think that the even the regular steam gun can be pretty good. And if you just kill 1 or 2 models off of a unit, you often mean that they can't contest your objective anymore. So I think the Gyrocopters are amazing at helping the Dwarfs police their objectives and protect, for example, their baggage trains, things like that nature, because they're just so fast. They also have the ability to charge in there and be able to run down an enemy unit after you win on combat res, because Dwarves have not only a great ability to just bring static combat resolution from your runes, but you also now have so much extra combat resolution from being, infantry. Essentially, the infantry changes mean that most monsters and chariots and things like that, they don't have the close order bonus anymore. You can outnumber them, so you have another combat res from that. And then the challenge rules mean that you often just don't get max overkill anyway, so you don't have to build a combat res 8 Death Star unit to actually be able to beat a dragon in combat. You can just beat them with, like, I think 13 Dwarf Warriors who are arranged, 4x3 can just, if they challenge a dragon, can just actually win combat about half the time because of the overkill not actually doing that, what you expect, right? So that's interesting. And I think that then when people are running away, the Gyrocopter can be there to go and grab them, or, in particular, if somebody charges you on your turn and then flees from combat, you now have the ability on your turn to charge them with a Gyrocopter and force them to flee yet again, either off the table or potentially really far away where they're not going to do anything for the rest of the game.
Yep. I think, again, people have been struggling with the because they keep trying to make it a really offensive war purpose. It really is a utility piece, and it's a great utility piece, and it's the fastest one for the dwarf unit, right? So whether it is I'm becoming a speed bump to get in the way of something, I'm supporting the flanks of my units that are charging, you are going to go take out some fast cavalry or some skirmisher units. You're going to go try and plink away some wounds to pull somebody off on an objective, or you're going to be behind enemy units. So if they flee, they get punked, or if they're fleeing already, you could chase them down. Honestly, it's hard to imagine being a player not taking at least 2 of these in your list every single time, at least 1. They really are a great utility piece. I wouldn't invest a ton of points in them. And I think about, again, it's not charging at the enemy, and it's not about running into combat. It's about how are you supporting your army in both board control and threat ranges, and just giving you that extra movement and just plinking away those couple wounds that are going to make a big difference. And maybe not turn 2, right? You're not trying to win the game on turn 2. The Gyrocopter is helping you win the game, clinch that win on turn, 3, 4, 5. That's where the Gyrocopter really shines.
Yeah, so I see the Gyrocopter essentially as being a one-man unit of similar to like a 5 Harpies or like a Razor Gore in Beastmen or in Dark Elves, for example, and just having those units that can be all about utility, about mobility, about saying, hey, I technically have a unit in the flank, so I technically get the +1 combat resolution, right? He doesn't have to be a big unit, it could just be a Gyrocopter. So
Mhm.
okay, so we have Longbeard Death Stars have been around for a while. I think with the Anvil of
Yes.
Doom going the way of the absolute dodo and just not being around that much, it's not quite as oppressive. But
No.
Longbeards still have the ability to have Strength 4 base. They have heavy armor and shield, so that's 3+ with a parry save if they want to, or they can switch over to great weapons and be Strength 6, which is unbelievable versatility. So just being able to pick your weapon in multiple combats is amazing for dwarves because you usually have, generally speaking, the best combo, which is heavy armor and shield for a parry save. That's at the best it can be at 3+, or a great weapon so you can have as much damage as possible depending on who you're fighting. If you're fighting a gigantic chaos spawn, you go for the great weapons. If you're fighting, impact hits from chariots or something, you're like, okay, let's use the hand weapons and shields and let the general just take this guy on or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think it's a very useful unit. It can fill up a lot of core points. I mean, I think that it's still going to be a staple of the meta. It's just not going to be moving 24 inches on the first turn anymore, which was kind of stupid in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. It's still very strong, and this is one of the best units that can use those shields, absorb that charge of almost anything in the game on the first round. Know that you're not going to flee, and then on the next round, now that the enemy's output from their lances, from their impact hits, from their monstrous charge, are they're not getting all those benefits. Now you can swap over to your great weapons and win the battle of attrition, which is one of the best things the dwarfs are good at doing. At, and longbeards are still very very good at that.
Yeah. Um, Dwarf Warrior. So Dwarf Warriors haven't really had a place to exist because if you want something that fights in melee, you get the Longbeards. They got the Strength 4. If you want something that's really, really strong, you would get maybe Hammer or something like that, right? Or if you want to shoot, you could either get Rangers or, Coralers, things something like that. So it's like, well, what's the Dwarf Warrior do? Well, I mean, having a 3+ armor save on a guy who's like 9 points is really, really good. I mean, that's like what I usually get, for 20, 25 points for an Empire Knight, you're going to get for 9 points. And so just having an absolute ton of very durable bodies can be very, very useful in the
Mhm.
right places. Dwarves also have really high leadership, so even if you don't have the stubborn rule or immune to panic or whatever, you can also just take those tests and just pass them. If you're outside the range of the general or whatever, just leadership 9, fantastic. So I think that regular Dwarf Warriors can absolutely just be units that you just bring, whether it's 10-man squads to say, hey, I have the strategic location. Do you want to try to fight me? I don't know if you do, because are you going to be able to deal with my 3+ armor save, right? Or
Mhm.
if you want to shoot me, oh no, I lost a couple of warriors from a unit, right? Because who cares? Like, so in other words, being a very cheap and throwaway unit can be amazing as well. You get drilled on pretty much every single dwarf warrior. So 5-man squads that go in little marching columns and run up there and say, hey, we're kind of like the flanking threat or the baggage train capturers or something like that can be amazing as well. And just again,
Mhm.
you do this for so cheap, So dwarf warriors, great. And so you have that
Mhm.
leadership and you have that armor and you have toughness. Well, who cares if you don't do that much damage? You can just be there and be a guy.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So just going out there, giving you permission to just try playing some Dwarf Warriors, bringing a large number of wounds, in particular versus things like Cathay, bringing small groups of dwarves like Longbeards and Rangers and nothing else, you can suffer some incredible losses against their shooting with templates and stuff. And you can't replace them because you only have this very small elite force. If you had more bodies on the table, then maybe they can spread out their shooting more and maybe you can give yourself cover or block things off. And so just having more bodies on the table can be good in itself.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, next, we've heard some rumors, and I really hope this to be true, that there's going to be a Slayer army with me in the War of Cetra's Fury Arcane Journal that's
Oh
coming
boy,
out
that would be
soon.
exciting if that happens.
Well, I explained to people when I were talking about our tournament that I played against a dwarf player running all Slayers. He was doing
So
Royal
cool.
Clan, and he had Ungrim as the general. He had 2 Demon Slayers that had a bunch of runes on them, and then he had 12 Doom Seekers. They were all
Hmm.
naked, and they were all naked, and they all had no items. They were naked in multiple ways, and they just jump out of their units and go, "If you don't shoot me, I might do some damage, and if you shoot me, then I don't give up victory points." So I've just got all these jackasses running at you. What a weird game. It was a really bad matchup for him to play against Wood Elves, but if you had a mostly melee army, and again, I tell people this all the time, bring some shooting, because if you play against this kind of a Slayer list, you might just lose. I know he was definitely playing it a bit as a meme, but again, I think Slayers have some interesting play here. And if the Army of Infamy actually helps them out by saying, hey, all of these Slayers together somehow have a ward save because they worship Grimnir or whatever, that would be pretty useful, and it would help them not all die to shooting, right?
Absolutely.
And that's it.
All right, we did it. We made it to the end of the Dwarfs. Again, please do let us know what you think we missed. Hit us up in the comments. Join us on the Discord. We'd love to hear more. Dwarves were great before. Dwarves are great now. I think they are going to have to adapt, though. A lot of the builds we were seeing before, in particular in the tournament builds, from focusing on the Anvil of Doom, focusing on that Longbeard Death Star list, are no longer viable, but they still have a lot of other viable lists. And they certainly are a very heavy infantry army that benefits from the parry save and all the other infantry benefits quite a bit than what we were getting in the book before. I think, right, the typical trap that Dwarf players, as many other players were doubling, tripling down on these super powerful units, and you spend so many points on it, suddenly nobody wants to engage with that unit, and they're just going to go for the rest of your army. I encourage you to look at different interesting combinations of different units, going for those baggage trains, going for those objectives, right, and how are you able to and respond to those different threats with your rangers, with your gyrocopters, and other ways that maybe you weren't looking at. Evan, any last closing thoughts, sir?
Just that you gotta stay legendary, even if you're a dwarf.
All right, we'll see you next time.